Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I'm back with my good friend, fellow elder, associate pastor, Dr. Jim McGowan. And today is August the 2nd, 2024. This is Pastor's Point of View, number 312. We have what we believe is a very urgent prophecy update for folks today. If you look at our preview slide, here are the things that we're going to cover. And what we don't cover within an hour, we'll pick it up in another session. But we're going to be looking at Gog-Magog. And as the Lord is my witness, Brother Jim, it looks as if our world, from the human perspective, is on the precipice of World War III.
Sure
and
does.
I don't think that's a hyperbole and an exaggeration.
I agree.
And we believe that the things that are happening right now are not the fulfillment, the direct fulfillment of the Gog-Magog invasion, Ezekiel 38 and 39, but they're sure pushing things into proper prophetic orbit.
Amen, brother. I agree with that.
We'll also be looking at the world against Israel. That theme is escalating. We'll also be looking at a little bit of news on the Third Temple. Some crazy stuff going on there. Microchip, Mark of the Beast technology, Revelation 13 is right on schedule, as we'll see. We are just recovering from the Olympics opening ceremony. And if that was not an advertisement for global religion, I don't know what is.
Is that right?
We'll talk about that. And then persecution continues to come against Christians all over the world, particularly here in the West, through something called FACE, F-A-C-E, a law that's being abused by the Biden regime.
Yes.
So with all of that being said, Brother Jim, we got a lot to talk about. And so let's go ahead and start with Gog-Magog. I wrote a book called The Middle East Meltdown. I put this up not to promote my stuff necessarily. It's just that people might wonder why Rosh equals Russia, Ezekiel 38 and 39. Turkey equals Meshach, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, Ezekiel 38 and 39, and Iran equals Persia. And we can't give the whole explanation on it, in our time limitations. So that's an easy way, in an easy to read book, to get that, explanation.
Well, I like it.
Well, thank you. So you take a look at our map, and this map, of course, comes from Ezekiel 38 and 39, that famous or infamous chapter that predicts an invasion of the land of Israel in the last days. And this map shows you all of the key players that are going to be invading Israel in the last days. Ezekiel 38 and 39 in a yet future military style invasion.
Yes.
And we believe that constantly the Lord is setting the stage, for the fulfillment of this prophecy. So you notice on this particular map we have Persia or Iran circled. I mean, Ezekiel 2,600 years ago says Persia or Iran is going to be one of the invaders.
Yes.
And my goodness, do we have any headlines that seem to correlate with that and set the stage for it? I mean, notice this first one here. This comes from the Times of Israel, and it says Austin, that's our United States Secretary, says the United States will help defend Israel if it is attacked by who? Iran, in the wake of an assassination.
Yeah.
So one of the key Hamas guys within the last day or two was assassinated on Iranian soil. I think it was in Tehran, presumably by Israel's Mossad. I mean, don't mess with Israel. And they assassinated this guy on Iranian soil. And of course, Israel is denying responsibility for the incident. I think that's all how the game of international relations and foreign affairs is played. But presumably it was Israel that did this. And Iran is threatening retaliation. And we kind of saw what happened with President Trump and the assassination attempt against him.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think Iran was somehow involved in that
Mm.
because President Trump, when he was in office, took out one of their key guys, Soleimani.
True.
And so the Iranians are just angry as all get out against the Israelis, and they're threatening an actual invasion against Israel, as is Turkey, which we'll talk about in
Yeah.
a minute. But what's this first article about?
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says Washington will help defend Israel if it is attacked, while working to reduce tension in the region following the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Iran. Asked what assistance the United States would provide if a wider conflict should break out in the Middle East, Austin says Washington would continue to help defend Israel if it were attacked, but the priority was de-escalating tensions.
So remember, it was Iran that fired 300 projectiles back in mid-April from its own territory into the land of Israel. And now everything is escalating with the assassination of this Hamas leader on Iranian soil, to the point where the United States is saying, well, if Iran retaliates through an attack, we're going to protect Israel. I mean, this is exactly what Ezekiel said would happen in the last days.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we see the stage being set from that standpoint. In fact, notice this particular picture. This is taken from a mosque in Tehran. Notice that the red flag is flying. And what is that? You have to understand that in the Middle East, symbols are almost a reality.
Yeah,
they
they're
mean everything.
Mhm.
The revenge flag is what this is called. The revenge flag is raised over mosques in Tehran.
Wow.
So you have Iran threatening Israel. Boy, that sure sounds a lot like what Ezekiel predicted 2,600 years ago. Keep in mind, Persia was the friend of Israel when Ezekiel wrote those words, because the Persians would let the Jews back into the Promised Land
That's right.
after the 70-year captivity. And of course, Iran was a ally of Israel.
Yep.
And an ally of the West until the Islamic Revolution in 1979, when the Shah was deposed and replaced with the Ayatollah. And ever since that point in time, we've seen nothing but tensions develop between the nations, reaching a zenith with mid-April, what we talked about a moment ago. And now they've got this red flag flying because they're blaming the Israelis for taking out one of their key guys, Hamas leader, in Tehran on Iranian soil. So could Ezekiel's prophecies be more relevant, Brother Jim?
Wow. Well, we keep saying this. It's like they're reading the Bible and then acting.
It sure looks that way, doesn't it? Let's talk Turkey here just for a minute. Can we do that? Here's our map again, and here we've got Meshach, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah circled. We know that Turkey is going to be one of the invaders in this end-time invasion. Now, Brother Jim, you know that Turkey was once an ally of Israel. In fact, the Israelis went to Turkey for their vacations.
Yeah.
Boy, how things have changed.
Boy,
as Islam has made it through that part of the world, Turkey has become hostile to Israel, exactly like Ezekiel said would happen. And notice this headline here. I mean, this again almost comes right out of the Bible, from the Jerusalem Post, July the 29th. By the way, the other headline we read about Iran was July 31st. So these are all very recent headlines.
Yes, sir.
And what does this say? This was before the assassination of the Hamas leader on Iranian soil. Erdogan, leader of Turkey, threatens Israel. And look at this. Like we entered, and I'm not sure how to pronounce that word there. Can you pronounce that?
Karabakh.
Can you say that again?
Karabakh.
Karabakh and Libya. We will do the same to Israel. So just like we invaded these other areas, we're about to do that to Israel. That was before the assassination. So this is from the Jerusalem Post, and what's happening here?
Jerusalem and Ankara traded sharp barbs on Sunday, with President Tayyip Erdogan seeming to threaten military action against Israel as tensions heated up between the Jewish state and the Iranian proxy group Hezbollah. Quoting, Erdogan is following in the footsteps of Saddam Hussein by threatening to attack Israel. Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, wrote in a post on X that the Turkish Foreign Ministry, well, actually, I'm sorry, I think I misquoted that. Erdogan is following in the footsteps, and that's Israel Katz, I think, was quoting that. The Turkish Foreign Ministry on Monday compared Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the World War II German Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler in a post on X. Just as genocidal Hitler ended, so will genocidal Netanyahu, the post stated. Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan said that Erdogan said earlier on Sunday that Turkey might enter Israel as it had done in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. Just like we entered Karabakh, just like we entered Libya, we might do similar to them, Erdogan told a meeting of his ruling AK party in his hometown of Rize. In 2020, Turkey sent military personnel to Libya in support of the United Nations recognized Government of National Accord of Libya.
Now notice, just to interrupt you for a minute, notice that Libya is involved here. That's one of the players, as we've talked about in the end time invasion. The article is going to go on and mention Iran.
Yes.
That's one of the players in the end time invasion. Mm-hmm. So when Turkey threatens to invade Israel, also mentioned in the loop here is several other end time players that Ezekiel speaks of.
Yeah, and let me correct my pronunciation there. The hometown is not Rize, it's Rize. It goes on to say here that Erdogan's threats come amid a dramatic flare-up in the 9-month cross-border war between the IDF and Hezbollah. A Hezbollah-launched Iranian rocket landed in the Druze village of Majasham in the Golan Heights on Saturday, killing 12 children. Relations between Israel and Turkey, which had been on the mend prior to the Gaza war, have frayed, with Ankara stopping all trade with Israel in May.
See, the Gaza war sure changed a lot of things.
Changed everything.
And here Turkey has called off trade with Israel. Now Turkey, even prior to this assassination in Iran, is vowing to invade Israel, just like we invaded Libya and other places. Yeah. So, my goodness, the Ezekiel 38 and 39 scenario certainly looks credible, doesn't it?
Oh boy, yes.
And if we could put up our map again, here we've got Russia and Turkey circled. Those two are going to play a key role in this invasion. And what's interesting to us is not just the rebirth of Israel, not just the assembly of the exact nations that Ezekiel predicted on the eve of this invasion, but how these nations would start to form alliances with each other. I mean,
it's fascinating.
It stands to reason that if they're going to cooperate and invade ahead of time as part of stage setting, you should see all of these nations in alignment, and that's what we're constantly seeing.
Well, you talk about the setting of the chess table, chessboard, and the pieces. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So Russia and Turkey will invade. We'll look at this headline here. This one from the Japan Times, July the 24th. It says Europe must clamp down on Russian oil flows through Turkey. Now, this is an interesting article because the author of this particular piece, it's kind of an opinion piece, is basically upset about the Ukraine issue. And we're not using the article for that purpose. But in the process of criticizing Russia, Ukraine, and getting into that whole subject matter, the author talks about how Russia is being empowered by oil from Turkey. Russia is dependent on oil from Turkey, and that's the part of it that's interesting to us from a prophetic standpoint, because it ties together Turkey and Russia, which is what Ezekiel said would happen at the end of the age. So what's going on in this relatively recent article?
To appreciate the booming trade in Russian fossil fuels, one need only go to a rooftop cafe along the Bosphorus back in March while sipping tea on an Istanbul terrace. I watched as over the course of 2 hours, at least 4 tankers, later identified through open source marine traffic websites, carried Russian crude and refined products through one of the world's busiest shipping choke points. A recent report by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air and the Center for the Study of Democracy confirmed what I observed in Istanbul. Turkey has facilitated the flow of Russian oil to the European Union since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, enabling the Kremlin to circumvent the bloc's sanctions and prolonging the war. In 2013, Turkey became the world's biggest buyer of Russian fossil fuels, importing around 42.2 billion, I guess that's euros, or $45.9 billion in oil, natural gas, and coal from the country. Now listen to this, folks, a five-fold increase over the past decade. Turkey's total imports of oil products from Russia more than doubled in 2023, totaling 17.6 billion euros and generating an estimated $5.4 billion in tax revenue for the Kremlin's war chest. The article goes on to say, the Kremlin's strategy of using Turkey as a pit stop exploits a glaring loophole in the sanctions regime that allows blended Russian oil products to enter the EU.
So basically this writer is complaining that, Russia keeps getting oil despite boycotts against Russia, and that's helping Russia with Ukraine. And well, how is Russia getting oil in spite of these boycotts? Well, she's getting it through and from Turkey. The two are in a energy relationship with each other. So you couldn't separate Russia and Turkey today if you wanted to.
They're bedfellows.
They're bedfellows. And it's so fascinating to see that headline because Ezekiel says the two of them, amongst others, will invade Israel.
Yeah,
and
they haven't. Those two countries haven't always been buddies, have they?
Not at all.
But something's changed.
Yeah, and every time we look at this, the picture gets clearer.
It sure does.
And clearer. Now, what about Russia, Turkey, and Iran? Notice this headline from worldisraelnews.com, again, very recent, July the 31st, 2024. Now, this is the reaction to the assassination of this Hamas leader named, help me with the pronunciation, Haniyeh, I think is how you say that, who was assassinated presumably by the Israelis on Iranian soil. Notice how Russia and Turkey have leapt to the defense of Iran.
Yes.
This particular headline says Russia and Turkey condemn this assassination as a shameful murder. And so even this assassination itself has pulled together Russia, Turkey, and Iran together, who are the three principal invaders in the Gog-Magog prophecy.
Wow, it looks like they're just trying to find anything they can to strengthen their bonds together.
Yeah, it's like every world event that happens, these bonds get stronger. What's going on here?
Here's the article. The presumed Israeli assassination of Hamas Politburo chief Ismail Haniyeh in Iran has shocked the terror group and sparked condemnation from countries and political entities affiliated with the terror group. Russia, which does not recognize Hamas as a terror group, slammed Israel for the assassination. Quote, "This is an absolutely unacceptable political murder, and it will lead to further escalation of tensions," RIA cited Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov told the state-controlled RIA news agency on Wednesday morning. Quote, "We condemn the assassination of the leader of Hamas's political office, Ismail Haniyeh, in a shameful assassination in Tehran," said Turkey's foreign minister in a statement.
So I've got Russia emboldened in those quotes. I've got Turkey emboldened in those quotes. And this whole article, going back to the first sentence, is about Iran and their reaction to this assassination attempt.
Yeah.
So it's it's a stunning thing. I mean the Gaza situation going back to last year, the events of October, what was it, October the 7th, has taken everything that Ezekiel said and put it into, high speed overdrive. And this assassination that just happened recently is doing the exact same thing.
Isn't it Russia's condemnation a bit like the pot calling the kettle black?
Yeah. It's like all these nations that hate human rights sitting on the Human Rights Council in the United Nations.
Wow.
And then if we look at our map again, here we've got Russia and Iran circled. So if they're going to invade Israel in the last days, like Ezekiel says, it stands to reason that the two would start cooperating.
Yes, sir.
Now, here is an article that comes a bit before this recent assassination. This is July the 26th, 2024, from the Tehran Times, and it talks about how Tehran and Moscow are working together to establish a joint science and technology committee. I mean, they're working together scientifically, according to this article. They're working together educationally, transferring credits to one another's universities.
Wow.
And they're working together technologically. Now, this was happening before this assassination, but what's happening here?
Gatyatov said that their announcement that Russia is fully supporting and fostering research and educational ties with Iran. And he went on to say that currently Iran and Russia are conducting 15 joint projects in fields like material sciences and biotechnology, which are scheduled to last for 3 years with budgets ranging from $40,000 to $70,000. And then the article continues and says that Iran and Russia are about to reach an agreement on mutually recognizing higher education degrees. Hadi Gudariz, the counselor of the Iranian embassy in the Russian Federation, has said. Moreover, Iran has just joined BRICS, comprising of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, starting academic and scientific cooperation with Russia within the BRICS framework.
So whether it's joining BRICS, recognizing each other's degrees, working together on technology, working together on science, I mean, Iran and Russia are joined at the hip.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Ezekiel indicated would happen at the end of the age?
It is. And let me just clarify, just so folks know, that this Gatyatov is actually the Deputy Minister of Science and Higher Education, so he's the one we're quoting.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about the Gog-Magog alignment all day, but
yeah, we could.
The hardest part about these prophecy updates is what to exclude. I mean, there's such an avalanche of information coming our direction, which shouldn't be surprising, because God means what he says and says what he means.
Yes, sir.
Let's, for the sake of time, go to our second bullet point, and this is another common theme in prophecy, the world against Israel. We have a couple of verses from Zechariah that we use as a jumping off point to discuss this. Can you give us those verses?
Gladly. We're reading from the New American Standard 1995 edition. This is Zechariah 12:3. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. And then just a little bit later in Zechariah 14:2 and 3. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle.
So the world, according to Zechariah's prophecies given 2,500 years ago, will turn against Israel in the last days.
Yes.
Before Israel nationally is converted and given the Holy Spirit, the Ruah, the Holy Spirit. So, my goodness, you don't have to look far in our headlines today to see that happening. Notice this particular headline from Sky news.com, it says the UK will not oppose the right of the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, says a spokesperson. Now, what's going on here is the International Criminal Court, as we've covered in prior shows, is involved now in not legal rulings, but political rulings.
Yes.
Masquerading as legal rulings. And basically they're upset at the fact that Israel is defending herself from
Yeah, imagine that.
from Gaza, where, by the way, everybody's saying Israel needs to pursue a ceasefire. Well, there was a ceasefire on October the 6th. It got ruined on October the 7th, not by the Israelis, 2023,
That's a very good point.
but by Hamas within Gaza.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Gaza is part of that southwestern portion of the map that the Israelis gave to the inhabitants of Gaza all the way back in 2004. No good deed goes unpunished, as we like to say.
Yeah.
Ever since it was turned over to the Gazans, it became a terrorist cell.
Yeah.
And so the events of October 7th came from Gaza. So what Israel is doing is she's going into Gaza, and she's not against Gazans. She's trying to root out Hamas from Gaza.
Yes.
So here comes the International Criminal Court saying that somehow Israel, by doing this, is violating international law. They never quote the specific law that's supposedly being violated. And if Netanyahu travels to any country now that has adopted the International Criminal Court by way of treaty, then Netanyahu can be arrested.
That's right.
So if Netanyahu goes to the UK, he can be arrested. And so what this particular article is about is how the UK, and they just had a big election there, the Labour Party won, if I'm understanding it correctly, moving the UK further, to the left.
Yeah.
And now they're on record saying, we're not going to oppose any arrest of Netanyahu by the International Criminal Court should Netanyahu travel to our country.
Wow.
So that's and it's just an example of how the world, the ICC, representing the nations of the earth, is unfairly turning against Israel, just like Zechariah predicted.
Britain has not learned from its past mistakes in its dealings with Israel at all, have they?
No, because the sun once set,
never set,
I should say,
yes.
on the British Empire, and that sort of changed when
sure did.
Britain became hostile towards Israel. So, no, they have not learned their lesson. But what's this article about? By the way, sorry to interrupt, this is a July 26th article from Sky News.
Yeah. Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government will not pursue an objection to the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Prosecutor Karim Khan Casey applied for arrest warrants to be issued for Israel's prime minister and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar over alleged war crimes earlier this year. It goes on to say, shortly after the arrest warrants were issued, Mr. Netanyahu said he rejected with disgust the Hague prosecutors' comparison between democratic Israel and the mass murders of Hamas. And then finally, at the end of the article, it says, as signatories to the ICC, the UK would be expected to follow its orders to execute the arrest warrant if Mr. Netanyahu were to visit the UK.
Wow. So Netanyahu's world is shrinking. Only so many places he could go without being arrested. And this ICC, International Criminal Court ruling, is based on this moral equivalence argument that both sides are guilty.
Yeah, equally guilty.
Yeah, equally guilty. And both sides need to show restraint.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's Hamas that attacked Israel.
That's
right. And Israel is trying to root Hamas out of Gaza to prevent that terrible scenario, which was the equivalent of their 9/11, our 9/11 is what they experienced, and worse, most likely.
Mm. Mm.
Israel is trying to prevent another 9/11, so-called, on their soil,
Yes.
and it's not this idea that both sides are guilty. You can't draw a moral equivalence
No,
between
sir.
the two.
No.
But that's what this International Criminal Court ruling did, giving this court the power to arrest Netanyahu should he travel to a country that is adopted by way of treaty the ICC. So I don't know what to say about this other than it's outrageous.
Mm.
It's ridiculous. It's political and not legal. Israel trying to protect itself from terrorism is not morally wrong. It's not the moral equivalent of what Hamas did to Israel October the 7th of last year. And as outrageous as it is, it's actually the outworking of what God said would happen. The
Yeah.
world would unfairly turn against Israel in the last days. Would you add anything to that?
Well, as you were saying those things, my mind just went back, and I thought, well, I guess we need to apologize to Japan for Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Isn't it a very similar type of a situation?
And that's how you can recognize the unfairness of this, is would this principle work
It's just crazy.
elsewhere? Well, here Algeria is jumping on board.
Of course.
Notice this particular article, again, fairly recent, July the 22nd, 2024. Algeria strongly condemns Israeli aggression on brotherly Yemen. What's going on here?
Algeria strongly condemned on Sunday the Israeli aggression on Yemen, calling on the international community to fully assume its responsibilities in holding the occupation entity accountable for its crimes. Quoting, "This aggression is part of the systematic and regular escalation strategy adopted by the Zionist entity to establish its absolute hegemony over the entire region and to divert attention from its countless and indescribable crimes, particularly in Gaza and in occupied Palestine more broadly," Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs said in a statement.
Notice that quote there, occupied Palestine, meaning Israel is there illegally, which we don't think is true.
Yes. It goes on to say, earlier today, the Sultanate of Oman also condemned the Israeli attack against the, quote, brotherly Republic of Yemen in a statement released by its foreign minister. The Arab country said the Israeli aggression on Yemen signifies escalations in tension in the region. It called on the international community to fulfill its peacekeeping responsibilities regionally and globally, urging it to decisively mobilize to protect civilians and guarantee the delivery of urgent humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip.
I hope people understand that Israel doesn't just go around indiscriminately attacking countries,
No.
The way Adolf Hitler did in the
Right.
World War II
Right.
era. I mean, Israel is about the size of New Jersey. When you look at it on a map, you can hardly see it.
Yeah.
And
That's
she's
right.
fighting for her very survival and existence with her back up against the Mediterranean Sea, surrounded by hostile Islamic theocracies perpetually promising to drive her into the sea. In fact, it's written in thetheir charters.
That's right.
That
That's
we
right.
want to destroy Israel. And what Israel is doing is self-defense.
Absolutely.
We're going to prevent you from attacking us, or we're going to take out people that have attacked us, or we're going to try to root out terrorism within our own borders. And because Israel is acting like any other sovereign nation should act, the world is against Israel. They're trumping up legal rulings that are not based on law, but politics. And what I'm seeing, Brother Jim, is the world is turning against Israel, just like God said.
Well, they've forgotten the Holocaust.
Sure have. And certainly the United States is better off.
Wow.
Right, Brother Jim? Well, no.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute. And let's remind ourselves of Genesis 12, verse 3. What does that say?
Yes, Genesis 12, verse 3. "And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed.
If you want to understand why the British Empire,
Mm-hmm.
where the sun never set on the British Empire, disintegrated, it's because of this verse right here.
Absolutely.
The moment God put his hand of blessing on Israel and said he would bless the world through Israel is the moment Satan decided to take out Israel.
That's right.
So Israel would need some promises from God to
Yes.
protect her. And one of the things God says is, whoever comes against Israel, I will come against. That's
Yes.
why I'm very fearful for our own nation.
Me too.
Because it seems like under our current leadership, we're fitting the pattern of the rest of these nations
Yeah.
throughout the earth that we have been speaking of. In fact, notice this particular article from the Jerusalem Post. The title of it is "No Way to Treat an Ally at War."
Yeah.
A Wall Street Journal editorial slams protests targeting Bibi's congressional address. The editorial concluded most of the anti-Israel movement despises America
Yep.
and seeks to intimidate Democrats into submission. July the 27th, the recent article 2024. So Netanyahu came to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice he was not invited, initially anyway, to the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kamala Harris did speak to him, but it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
So there was acrimony from her towards him. Biden and Harris do not greet Netanyahu at the airport.
Right.
So Speaker Johnson, who has a razor-thin majority in the House of Representatives, says to Netanyahu, okay, come on over here to the House of Representatives and speak.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Harris is supposed to be there, she doesn't show up. They put like the number 2 or the number 3 or the number 4
Mm-hmm.
Democrat in there who
Mm-hmm.
is retiring, I believe,
Yeah.
and not subject to any sort of election pressures in Harris's place. And this is how we're treating an ally at war.
Correct.
And this article picks up on how Netanyahu and his associates have been treated in the United States when he came to visit recently. What does this article say?
This article infuriated me.
Yes.
Folks, here it is. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board on Thursday published a condemnation of the way anti-Israel protesters acted during Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the U.S. Congress this week. The board pointed to numerous crimes committed by protesters, including the defacement of federal property, the wounding of police officers, the burning of American flags, and the dumping of mealworms, maggots, and crickets into a hotel where Netanyahu was residing. Bon appetit, the Palestinian Youth Movement wrote on Instagram, adding, mealworms and maggots, not talking about Netanyahu, were left on their banquet tables, and crickets were released on multiple floors in the hotel.
I think that was the Watergate Hotel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm. The WSJ expressed sympathies for the hotel staff, who would have to clean up the pests, and for U.S. taxpayers, as donations to the charity that controls the Palestinian Youth Movement remain tax deductible.
Now, before you go on, this dumping of mealworms and maggots where Netanyahu and his staff were staying, isn't that the kind of thing that you do with like fraternity pranks and sorority pranks? I mean, isn't this like high school and junior high school level stuff? In fact, one of these Democrats, because he was upset that a bill was about to pass, set off a fire alarm. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
I think it was the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that something you do when you're in high school or junior high school?
Very juvenile behavior.
Yeah, juvenile behavior. And this is how a major political movement is treating an ally who is at war.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put mealworms and maggots on the banquet tables where Netanyahu and his staff are staying.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
And the article concludes with this. The board further condemned members of the Democrat Party for boycotting Netanyahu's speech, stating that the actions of the protest proved, quote, Netanyahu's point that many anti-Israel protesters choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. It charged that the boycott of Netanyahu was no way to treat an ally at war.
So, you might think, well, this is just how a certain group within America is treating Netanyahu. No, not when Harris won't even go listen to him speak.
No, it's unbelievable.
So what's happening is our political leadership is turning against Israel, which is significant prophetically because the world will turn against Israel, including the United States, but it puts the United States under the curse of Genesis 12:3. Now, none other than James Dobson got upset about this in his, I think this is entitled his Table Talk, and this was posted on his Facebook page. I found it July the 28th, 2024. I'm not sure if it's still posted there, but that's when I went and found it. But what does he say here? Because he describes this whole Jew-hating mentality that's now risen to the surface through the Netanyahu visit.
All right, here's the article. America-hating and Israel-hating neo-Marxists, along with their radical Islamist allies, took over part of Capitol Hill this week. They took down U.S. flags in Columbus Circle, burned them, and raised the Palestinian flag. They defaced monuments. All of this was because the Prime Minister of Israel was in town. Some carried the flag of the terrorist group Hamas. Others carried signs calling for the genocide of the Jews in the name of Allah. The Biden-Harris administration said virtually nothing about this outrage. Few arrests were made, and the perpetrators were released in 24 hours. Other disruptions occurred across the city as well. Radical activists stormed the Watergate Hotel, where the Israeli delegation was staying. They released swarms of crickets and maggots in the meeting rooms. The current leadership at the White House has targeted parents at school board meetings and jailed a pro-life grandmother, but essentially turned a blind eye when terrorists vandalized property and assaulted police officers. This administration's lack of action against such outrageous acts speaks volumes to their character. To their true character, I should say. The most vigorous denunciation of the violence was left to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who called the radical protesters Iran's useful idiots.
Yeah, and that, of course, is a pretty good nomenclature for these people.
Absolutely correct.
So we're gonna, under the current regime, the Biden regime, as I call it, we're gonna wage war against parents upset at critical race theory and pornography being taught to their children when they show up at school board meetings and voice their concern. They're the terrorists.
Right.
Now these people here that do all these vandalism and maggots and all these things that they're doing because Netanyahu is in town, we're going to legally turn a blind eye to them. No jail time, no prosecution.
Assaulting police officers.
Yeah, assaulting police officers, no police enforcement. But boy, those parents that show up at those school board meetings, they're very, very dangerous. It shows you the distortion and perversion that's now taking place in our country.
That's right.
And I'm concerned, Brother Jim, the number one issue for me because of Genesis 12 verse 3 is we are turning against Israel from the top down.
I hear you, brother.
And
I agree.
I don't think that bodes well for our country.
I don't either.
But it sure is consistent with what God said would exist at the end of the age.
God is right.
Isn't it? Let's toss in, if we could, Brother Jim, one more issue, and it has to do with the temple. The third temple is a big deal in Bible prophecy. yet to be built because
Mhm.
of Daniel chapter 9 verse 27. What does that prophecy indicate?
Daniel 9:27, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate.
Now we have this depicted in an overview graphic. It tells you what is going to happen right in the middle of the 7-year tribulation period, the Antichrist in the middle of the seven.
Mm-hmm.
This coming 7-year time period is going to desecrate the Jewish temple, something that can't be done unless you have a Jewish temple.
Exactly, that's right.
So what we're dealing with here is temple number 3. Here is a list of Israel's 2 past temples. The Solomonic temple destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. That was followed by Zerubbabel's temple built by that post-exilic community,
Yes,
destroyed ultimately by the Romans in AD 70, and for 2,000 years Israel hasn't had a temple.
that's right.
And yet prophecy indicates that she's got to have temple number 3.
That's true.
Because you can't desecrate something that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very interesting anytime you run into an article where the temple, the third temple, building the third temple is a bone of contention.
That's right.
You know, it's been put this way. When the discussion of the world moves to Israel, you know you're dealing with God's hour hand.
Yes, yes.
When the discussion of the world moves to Jerusalem, you know you're dealing with God's minute hand. And when the discussion of the world moves to the Temple Mount, now we're dealing with the second hand.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Wow.
There are constant refrains in Israel that we need to rebuild Temple 3.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then every time some of the devout Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox articulate that, they're quickly batted down by other Israelis because they know this would further inflame the Muslim world, because the Muslim world thinks that the Temple Mount is theirs, because that's where Muhammad allegedly ascended back to Allah on a steed named Barak, even though the word Jerusalem is found nowhere in the Quran, but it's found, about 800 times in the Bible.
Yeah.
But here we go again. An i24news.tv article, again very recent, July the 24th, 2024, the Knesset, that's Israel's leadership body, erupts in an uproar after Ben-Gvir demands changing Temple Mount status quo. Ben-Gvir here is quoted as saying, "I prayed on the Temple Mount." And we pray on the Temple Mount, Ben-Gvir declared. "I am the political echelon," and the political echelon, his position, allows Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. He's obviously zealous for the Temple Mount, rebuilding Temple number 3, and the others are saying, "What in the world are you doing?
Yeah.
You're about ready to cause World War III,"
Yeah.
because Muslims are not going to take nicely or kindly to this. So briefly, what happened here?
National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir shocked lawmakers during a return of Israel to the Temple Mount conference held Wednesday in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, declaring that he had prayed at the Temple Mount and that Jewish prayer was allowed on there. Quoting, "I prayed on the Temple Mount, and we pray on the Temple Mount," Ben-Gvir said, quoting again, "I am the political echelon, and the political echelon allows Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount." The statements upturned the status quo between Israel and its neighbors, Jews and Muslims, and even within the Jewish community.
So, and we were, as you were reading that, up there was a picture of him going up there, and it says beneath it, National Security Minister Gvir ascends to the Temple Mount for the first time since the October 7th massacre took place. So this, I believe, is a sign for the end of the age. Look for the Temple Mount to become, and the rebuilding of Temple 3. to become more and more part of the
Yeah.
conversation, because
Yeah.
Bible prophecy demands that some way, somehow, it's got to be up and running at least midway through the tribulation
That's
period.
right.
So I think the proper way of looking at these signs is not just looking at an isolated sign, but the signs coming together concurrently,
Yes.
which is what is happening
The
in our
big
world.
picture.
And think of the statistical improbability of just these signs we've discussed in this brief program happening by coincidence. We've seen the Gog-Magog alignment,
Mm-hmm.
right down to the intricate alliances being formed between those various players
Mm-hmm.
that Ezekiel predicts would invade Israel in the last days. The world is turning against Israel, whether we're talking about international criminal court rulings or things going on in Algeria, or how we in the United States are treating an ally at war.
Yeah.
And then you have these rumblings concerning the third temple. And these signs are so voluminous, Brother Jim, we're going to have to break it at this point and pick up the remaining 3 signs in our next show together. But if people out there, may be terrified by these things because they don't know Christ personally, what would you tell them?
Well, the Bible says that today's the day of salvation. And the thing that you need to be mostly concerned about is not what we're telling you here, but what you're going to do when you meet God face to face without Jesus. The Bible very clearly says that man sinned in the garden, and sin came upon all of mankind. So we have a problem as human beings that we're separated from a holy God. And so God took the initiative because of his great love for mankind. He graciously made a provision whereby we could be reconciled to God and live with him forever, have eternal life. But that can only happen if you place your faith, trust, and confidence for the safekeeping of your soul into the hands of the Lord Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for you and for me. He didn't just stay on the cross, and he didn't just stay in the tomb, but God raised him from the dead as an evidence that he could fulfill all of the promises he's made to us. And so our charge, our admonition to you today is to do that very thing. Put your faith, trust, and confidence in Jesus Christ. Don't delay. Today is the day of salvation.
And before we sign off on this particular session, I want to make people aware of just one infomercial. Usually we give quite a few at the end, but here we have time just for one, and it has to do with our Sugar Land Bible Church Prophecy Conference, February 22nd, all day Saturday, 2025. Featuring, and this is sort of the mother of all prophecy conferences as far as I'm concerned. And we have no idea what the state of our world's going to be like by the time we hit
That's
February.
right.
But we're going to have people here that can analyze that for folks.
Awesome.
And
Yes.
so it's basically a Faith for Final Days conference, and we just have some outstanding speakers. We have Dr. Randall Price presenting.
Awesome.
Expert in the Middle East, expert
Yes.
in Bible prophecy, expert in the Third Temple, expert in Noah's Ark. We have Bill Federer presenting, expert in Islam, expert in anti-Semitism, expert in true American history. We have back with us the great Olivier Melnick. He's going to be dealing specifically with the anti-Semitism issue. I mean, how do we know the Jews living in the land of Israel are real Jews? A lot of people are saying they're not.
Yeah, that's right.
What about the so-called Khazar theory? What about the Rothschilds? I mean, aren't the Jews the synagogue of Satan?
Yeah.
What about the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which blame the Jews for all of the problems around the world? There's a lot of mythology out there that feeds into anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
He's going to be debunking those. I'm going to be one of the
Amen.
speakers. We're going to have special music by some of our in-house people.
That's exciting.
We got a lot of talented people within our own church. Conference music by Olam, which means forever, by the way. Olam Worship, and then we're going to have some music by Claude and Rebecca Chu, two of our very talented church members. So this is going to be a conference that goes all day Saturday, February the 22nd, and you want to get here Friday
Yeah, you better.
because we have a banquet at
Yes.
nearby Sugar Creek Country Club, February the 21st, Saturday evenings. One of our four, we're still working on the schedule, is going to be presenting at that banquet, and then our folks are going to be presenting all day Saturday. And you know what? You want to stick around Sunday
Mm-hmm.
because these guys are going to be back presenting during our regular sessions here at Sugarland Bible Church on
It's going to
Sunday,
be awesome.
the 22nd. And guess what, Brother Jim? I'm delighted at the fact that registration on the Sugarland Bible Church website is now live.
We need a drum roll,
Yes.
right?
And so I would register quick. I would register early,
Yes.
both for the banquet and for the Saturday conference. Obviously, Sunday you don't need to register because it's a normal church service.
Right.
Because we anticipate that given the reality of world events, this conference is going to fill up very, very fast. And so I want to make people aware of that. And we're going to pick it up right here, Brother Jim, in our next show together. We want to thank people for watching and listening to Pastor's Point of View. Please share this ministry because when you click share, you put us into a sphere of influence that we can't get into by ourselves, your own friends list, because we believe that this information is pertinent. We want everyone to
Amen.
hear it. And so we will see you next time on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you. Thank you for watching and listening.
God bless.